Hello, my name is Elisa Carson, and I am the course assistant for this course for the summer 2023 semester. I'm going to be doing a video about how to secure a research assistant position, an undergraduate research assistant position at USF and beyond. So, just a little bit about myself. I just finished my fifth year in USF's clinical psychology PhD program. I came here in 2018 from Michigan, and I worked in two research labs before starting grad school. Before I get into the logistical details of getting an RA position, I want to briefly talk about why you might want to apply to research assistant positions and what to expect from them. So, why apply? Well, many graduate programs require research experience, including pretty much all PhD programs in psychology. Most will want to see a minimum of 1 year of experience, but research focused programs, including most clinical psychology programs, will want to see more than 1 year of experience. So, this is something to get started on early in your undergraduate career. Sometimes people think that they won't be competitive applicants for these positions until their junior or senior year. That's not necessarily true. It's really never too early to start applying and start getting involved, especially because the principal investigator or the person running the lab, who's usually a USF psychology faculty member, they like to bring people in early because that increases the likelihood that they'll stay longer. And uh, hiring and training new RAs, it takes time and resources. And so the more you can like have people undergrads staying for multiple years, the better for them. Now, you only have to commit to 1 year at a time. I'll talk more about the eligibility requirements in a bit, but that's just something to keep in mind that it definitely doesn't have to be limited to just 1 year. So it's also a really great opportunity to learn more about the scientific research process, and it can inform your goals for grad school and beyond. You might find that you really like it, or you might find that you really hate it. If you hate research, that's okay, but you would probably be very unhappy in a really research heavy grad program. So it's an important thing to know when considering PhD programs and careers in psychology. If you do a PhD, you're going to have to do a master's thesis and a doctoral dissertation. Those are two independent research projects that you have to do. You'll have support from an advisor, but you'll have to do that pretty much on your own. So, if you really dislike that process, it's not going to be very fun for you. And it's really important for you to know ahead of time. Beyond that, it can also help you better understand your research interests. So let's say you're someone who really likes research, like you really enjoyed your research methods course, you get into a research lab and you know that you like the research process, we can help you refine your research interests. So you might just kind of think, okay, I'm really interested in, the functions of the brain, but I don't really know what specifically I'm most interested in within that broad topic category. So, getting involved in research on specific topics can help inform those interests. You also just get exposed, even beyond what's being studied in that lab. You'll get exposure to other kind of related research projects through publications that you might hear about or review in your lab meetings, that sort of thing. So it's a great way to just intake all that information. So, in terms of what to expect, most labs are going to expect a 1 year commitment. So, that is 3 semesters. So, this could be your fall, spring, and summer semester, or if you start in the spring, summer, and fall. But 3 semesters is typically the requirement. Um, you can expect to work about 8 to 10 hours a week for most research labs, although this may vary. It may be different during, like the summer semester, for instance. Um, Usually, you'll expect to attend weekly lab meetings. They're usually about an hour, maybe a little more. You'll also assist with research projects. This might involve data collection, data entry, possibly data cleaning, data analysis, and maybe even involvement in publications. So you'll also work with grad students. So you'll have some really great opportunities to pick their brains about what grad school is, what it's like what it's like just being in grad school. Um, and some tips for applying to graduate programs as well. Most likely, you'll mainly be working with other undergraduate RAs, lab managers, and some grad students, and you won't have a lot of direct contact with the lab's principal investigator, although this is lab dependent. Some benefits to you. It's valuable experience. It's really valuable experience just having that intimate knowledge of the research project. It's one thing to learn about it in your research methods course, but it's another thing to see it play out and see all the nitty-gritty little details and all the steps that go into it. Um, You'll also learn more about yourself and your research and career interests. Like I mentioned, you'll learn more about the things that you like and maybe things that you don't like. Uh, you'll also be able to get a letter of recommendation. Now, this is assuming that you meet the requirements, do everything that you said that you would. So you work all 3 semesters and you aren't late to things, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You can usually expect to get a letter of recommendation from the PI. So this is important because usually you'll need like at least 2 or 3 letters of recommendation for graduate programs. And it looks really good to have at least one of those letters come from a researcher, a principal investigator of a research lab. Now, that's always something that you can confirm with the person during your onboarding process or during your interview. But that's usually something that would pretty much be guaranteed if you kind of check all those boxes. There's also the possibility of a paid position down the line. So I mentioned that I worked in 2 research labs before I came here. So that was up in Michigan. Did my undergrad at Michigan State, and so I was involved in 2 labs there. And then I took 2 gap years before I came to grad school. And one of those labs offered me a paid position. It was a full-time paid position. So that gave me the opportunity to continue getting research experience while I was preparing for grad school. One thing that's important to keep in mind is like this might vary across different graduate programs, but I know from my experience and a lot of the programs that I know about have their applications due around November or December. So that would be for the admission of the following fall. So if I wanted to start a graduate program in fall of 2025, I would be um, like submitting my applications in like November of 2024. So that's just a little plug to, consider doing something like this during your gap year. You don't always have to do it all during your undergraduate time. It can be useful to have a year off. And also you really want to think about like the time in between when you first join the research lab and when your applications are due. Because um, if you join a lab like the fall before you plan to start a graduate program, well, you might have 1 year of experience by the time that you actually start the program, but you'll only have a few months of experience by the time that you have to submit your applications. So it's just something to keep in mind in terms of your timeline as well, because that's something that, in my experience, a lot of people kind of forget to think about. Just one other point that I want to make about this. Particularly for students who are coming from out of state. So the summers can be a little bit tricky. Like I mentioned, the summer semester is typically a time that they would expect you to be working. Now, depending on the lab, there can be some flexibility around this. So if you absolutely have to go back home for the summer, you're not available during the summer, you're studying abroad or something, you can talk to the PI or the lab manager, whoever you're doing your interview with, and ask about whether there's any flexibility there. You might be able to skip the summer semester and then do your 3rd semester in the following fall. If that makes sense. All right. So now you've decided that you want to join a research lab. Here's some information about how to find info about the labs. So I'm actually going to share my screen here. All right. So in Google, I'm just going to type in USF psychology and I'm going to pull up the Department of Psychology website. Now, looking at these options on the top here, I can click on research. And then on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on research facilities. These are the research labs. in the USF Department of Psychology. So there's a bunch here. I can click on each one to read more about it. So this one is the Disinhibition and Affect Regulation Clinical Lab, so the DARK lab. They're interested in applying personality and affective science technologies to understand disinhibition, externalizing disorders, emotion deficits or excesses, and dysregulated emotions in adults and adolescents. So this is Dr. Edelyn Verona, the principal investigator. Now, oftentimes, though not always, there will be a link that you can click on that leads to the research lab's website. So this is the Dark Labs website. You can even see that they're active on Twitter. There's a section below. You've got a picture of them here. This is Dr. Verona with her graduate students. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to read about what is studied in the lab. So the intersections of psychology, crime, and violence, and how do we study it? So what methods do they use? This lab partners with Pasco County Jail, and so they actually conduct a lot of assessments and administer therapy at Pasco County Jail. And so a lot of the undergrad research assistants in this lab are involved in that project. So if I go back up to the top here, I'm going to click on this panel on the left so I can read more about the people. So let me try that again. People. So I'm going to click on the director. So this is Dr. Verona. I can read about her. I can read about her research interests. I always recommend looking for paragraphs that start with something like more recently, because this is going to tell you about the most up-to-date research in the lab. Now, it's important to remember that sometimes this information can be a little bit outdated. It's possible that the person hasn't updated this website in a year or two, maybe more. So while this is a useful starting point, it'll also be helpful to during your interview, ask about any changes, updates, any changes in the trajectory of the research course. So you can also read about for graduate students and their research. So this can be especially useful if you're thinking about doing like your own project within the lab at some point using the lab's data. Like if you'd like to use their data to put together a poster, to present at a conference, or even like a publication. So sometimes the principal investigator's research focus will be a little bit narrow, but their students' interests will be a little bit broader overall, or kind of like a little bit more peripherally related. So this will help give you a sense of just the scope of research that the PI is interested in overseeing. So if you're like, okay, I'm interested in this broadly, but there's this more specific kind of component of it that I'm really, really interested in, and like it kind of matches, but it kind of doesn't, you could do a little scan of the graduate student research to kind of get a better sense of how far outside that main sort of topic of interest they're willing to go. And there's another tab for projects. So past work and findings. This is just an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the projects in depth. Here are 3 recent projects they've been doing. And then there's also a Join Us tab here. There's a lot of really useful information there. I definitely recommend exploring the website in full, but I'm going to skip to the Join Us tab. So this has information about how to join the lab. So this first section is about graduate students. That doesn't apply to us. We can skip that and scroll down to the area for research assistants. Are you interested in psychology and crime, emotion dysregulation, personality disorders, violence and aggression? This may be the research opportunity for you. It's nicely packaged there. So this first section describes the types of activities performed. So data collection, what can I expect to be doing? And then this part talks about requirements for being a research assistant. So sometimes there's a GPA minimum. In this lab, RAs typically have GPAs of at least 3.2. There's a note about professionalism, expecting RAs to arrive on time and carry out their obligations, things like that. Research assistants typically work the equivalent of 10 hours a week. Here's some information that's useful to know. Some weekends are involved, but not very often. We are only recruiting students that can work on our jail project and require a commitment of at least 3 semesters due to the fact that we do substantial training of RAs during the beginning of the semester. We prefer not to have to train students every semester. Research assistants are interested in the jail project are required to travel to the Pasco County Jail and should factor travel times into their weekly commitments. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you don't have a car, then this might be really hard for you to do, right? Shifts are typically 4 to 5 hours total, accounting for the 3 hours at the jail, travel time, and pre-post session procedures. They also talk about their research lab meetings being held weekly. Undergrads are required to attend. So, um, so that's also a time, like a slot on your schedule that you would need to keep open. So they'll usually tell you, I mean, you could ask in the email, or they'll probably tell you on the interview. So you'd want to have that time slot open and keep it open for future semesters as well. Letters of recommendation are only available to RAs that honor these commitments. So if you only do 2 semesters and you drop off, you wouldn't be eligible for a letter of recommendation. So this lab actually has a research assistant form that you can fill out. It looks like you just fill it out right here and it automatically submits once you click next probably. So that's a really easy way to do it there. There's also a contact listed if you have any questions. So yes, they make it really easy for you. Let's look at one more lab and see if there are any differences. So this is the Disordered Eating Prevention, Treatment, and Health Lab run by Dr. Diana Rancourt, the Depth Lab, Disordered Eating Behaviors and Outcomes. So they have a website as well. Yeah, they got a bunch of pictures. They have a people tab, research. Um, I'm the CV is also listed here. So I'm going to talk about that more in a bit. They also list full text publications. I'll talk more about what to do with that in a sec. So let's see, they have a Join Us tab as well. Again, we're going to ignore the grad student part and go down to prospective research assistants. The Depth Lab does not currently have any paid or volunteer positions open for fall 2023. All right, well, it's summer 2023 now, so this probably hasn't been updated since then, so it sounds like it would, it would be worth asking about. They also have an application. Let me see. So in this case, you download and complete this application, and then you return it via email to Dr. Rancourt. Feel free to return the application even if we are not actively recruiting RAs. We do keep applications on file for when RAs positions become available. So that's usually the case. So it definitely doesn't hurt to still apply even if they say that they're not accepting RAs. So this is one way to find information about research labs. Now, unfortunately, not every faculty member has their research lab listed on this page. There may be other research labs that aren't represented. So another way that you can find information about labs is if you go to People, Faculty, and then you can click on any faculty members' names and kind of read about what they do. So I'm going to go to my advisors page on Dr. Bornavalova. So here you can read about her research on externalizing psychopathology, personality disorders like BPD. Um, You can find information about funding for projects that she's received, and she also has selected publications. So, excuse me. So one thing I definitely recommend doing is reading over some of the recent publications for the labs that have been done under the labs that you're interested in. So I'm going to pick one where Dr. Bornavalova was the first author. So this one here. Um, I'm just going to go to Google Scholar here. I'm going to copy the title and paste it in. So now I can read about this paper, and this was published in 2020. So I guess it's a little bit dated now, but this is going to be, recent publications are going to be most representative of their current work. Another thing that you can do is look at their CV or their curriculum vitae. So this Look, this one was updated in March of 2023, so just a couple months ago. So you can scroll down and look at the more recent publications here. Yep, so there are some here from 2022 and more recent. Some of them are in press. All right. So, let's say that you are interested in applying to a lab that doesn't have one of those application buttons on their website, so you have to apply a different way. So, um, what you'll do in that case is you'll just email them directly. So you can get the faculty member's email from the department website, and then you can draft an email. So I've drafted an example one here. Let me reshare my screen. So I'm going to share a different page now. So this is an example email that I drafted. So if you were wanting to apply to Dr. Bornavalova's research lab, you might say something like this. I'll just go ahead and read it out loud. Um, Dear Dr. Bornavalova, my name is Jenny and I'm a third-year psychology major at USF. I'm emailing to inquire about potential research assistant opportunities in your lab. You may remember me from your research methods course in spring of 2022, where I learned a great deal about the process of conducting research and received a 4.0. I am pursuing a career in clinical psychology and am currently hoping to gain more research experience to prepare for graduate school and learn more about my own interests. I came across your research on the department website and was immediately intrigued by the topics being investigated in your lab, such as the development of externalizing psychopathology and traits such as impulsivity. I would be interested in contributing to your work and I am attaching my CV. If you are accepting applicants at this time, I would love to discuss this opportunity with you further. Thank you in advance for your consideration. I look forward to hearing back. Best regards. I made up this name, Jenny Davis. So yeah, so I included something about past interactions with her. So, if this is a faculty member that you know in any way, maybe you've taken a course, chances are that, they might not remember you if it was a big course, but it's worth mentioning, hey, I was in your class, especially if you got a good grade in the class. Like if you received a 4.0 in the research methods class, for instance, that's definitely worth mentioning. Um, so you can always take that part out if it doesn't apply to you. Now, one thing to keep in mind, faculty members are really busy people, so it's possible that they might not get back to you that promptly. They might even forget to reply to you. So if it's been like, a couple weeks or more and you haven't heard back, you can feel free to send a follow-up email. So I drafted an example of that. Hi, Dr. Bornavalova. I hope you're doing well. I was just wondering if you had a chance to read my last email inquiring about undergraduate research assistant opportunities in your lab. Best, Jenny Davis. So short and sweet. Um, you can also look up, like you can Google um, other, sorry, lost my train of thought. You can Google examples of research assistant applications online. There are plenty of applications, um, or plenty of like email prompts, email drafts to look through to give you some ideas. That's one that I just kind of came up with. All right. So let's say that you have reached out, they got back to you, and they said they're interested in interviewing you. So some things to consider with this, just kind of to be prepared. You might not be interviewing with the PI themselves. You might be interviewing with a lab manager, a project coordinator, a grad student in the lab. So you'll know that ahead of time usually, like oftentimes, like when you first reach out, they'll say, okay, yeah, I'm forwarding your application to my lab manager and they'll follow up. So that's kind of something that you can expect there. Um, so just remember when you're going into the interview that they're looking for someone who's first and foremost able to maintain basic standards of professionalism, like show up on time, follow through with tasks you agree to complete, just be professional in emails and formal communication. So, showing up to the interview on time is a great example to demonstrate those professionalism skills. Um, You also want to talk up any experience you have with research. So, this may be your first research lab experience, and that's totally okay. At this stage, PIs are not expecting you to have extensive research experience. Probably the vast majority of applicants they get are first time RAs. So, that's totally normal. Um, but if there's anything that you can draw upon in terms of prior research experience, definitely mention that. So if you've taken the research methods course, then it's definitely worth mentioning, especially if you got a 4.0 in the course. And if you haven't taken the research methods course, when do you plan on taking it? You might mention, I haven't taken it yet, but this position is due to start in the spring of next spring semester, and I'm planning on taking it that same semester so I can kind of learn the ropes in the lab and learn this background on research methods concurrently. Um, it's also a really good class to aim to 4 point as well, because that's going to make you a more competitive applicant for these labs and also grad school more broadly. Um, this is also an opportunity to show that you've done your research. So, um, are there things that you can draw upon that you learned about on the website, like specific keywords that you remember seeing? Talk about those. If you just say, oh, yeah, I'm just interested in research generally, like nothing in particular, then you might not come off as such a strong applicant. They might think you're disinterested. So try to be able to name specific interests, specific things that you think are neat about what they're doing in the lab. You also want to ask questions about time commitments. So like 8 to 10 hours, is that, like pretty consistent throughout each week? Or are there, weeks where you don't work at all, or, see how much it varies? Other requirements, like, do I need a car? Are my tasks all going to be taking place at USF? And so as long as I can get to USF, it's no problem. Or do I need to go to this like external location as part of my responsibilities? Um, am I able to attend those lab meetings? What time do those occur? Things like that. And you can also ask about future directions in the lab. So it's possible that really cool project that you read about on the website has just ended by the time you get the interview, and maybe they're about to launch into some completely different um, research project that really doesn't interest you at all. So make sure to ask about future directions of the research in the lab so you get that up-to-date information. And just be you, show some personality. Um, yeah, any just general interview skills that you've learned throughout your life are likely to apply here. Yeah, so I think that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. My email is listed on the syllabus. And again, I am in the clinical psychology program, so I can mainly just speak to my experiences preparing for the clinical psychology PhD route. Most, if not all, of what I've talked about should also be relevant to other types of programs in psychology, like cognitive, social, personality, things like that. But there may be some differences with those fields that I don't know about. Yeah, good luck.